Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 17 quarterback rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. On today's episode, of course, we're talking about all things related to the quarterback position, beginning with matchups. We'll talk about which defenses are giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks thus far this season on average in a 4-point per passing touchdown format. After that, of course, we're going to be talking about my top 16 quarterback rankings for this week, giving you guys some perspective as to what my opinion is on how these quarterbacks are going to potentially perform. Now, if you are trying to stay up to date on my latest rankings, because again, the rankings that I put up on screen today may not be or reflect identical to what I have Sunday morning, because there are players that are going to miss, there are players that are going to be out. Even some of these quarterbacks may be deemed out prior to Sunday's game. So if you're trying to stay up to date, make sure you show up Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. We're going to be live streaming before the games like we typically do every Sunday morning, kickoff with Kirchhoff. We're going to be talking about our updated quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end rankings, and giving you guys some perspective as to how I think the week is going to go, answering questions. So if you guys are interested, make sure you show up. I want to also, before we begin, thank you guys for subscribing to the channel and supporting the channel all season long and being here. I really do appreciate you guys making my 2020 that much better. So thank you. If you guys haven't already, subscribe to the channel, join the community. We're going to be talking about some 2021 NFL playoff stuff like that. And of course, we're going to be making content for the 2021 fantasy football season as we progress through the year. But either way, we're going to ramp up until we get to August, September, when it really starts to get the gears turning. But either way, thank you guys. And let's get into today's video, shall we? Okay, so I wanted to address this because I did address it in the tight end video, but if you guys didn't watch that, I want to go ahead and talk about it. Yesterday, I had a wide receiver video. I talked about Deontay Johnson as my number 8. I talked about Juju Smith-Schuster, I think at like 17, 16. Either way, I had them pretty highly ranked. The whole point was, I didn't even know that Ben Roethlisberger was going to be out. That's how, that one slipped past me. Typically, things like that don't slip past me. And I would have said, oh, it was a matter of, it came out during my recording. No, it was even a day before that it was announced that he wasn't even playing. So that slipped completely past me. Again, there are players of high caliber that are not going to be playing this week. Again, another reason why you should not be playing your fantasy football championship in the final regular season game. So again, make sure you tell your commissioners, or if you are the commissioner of your league, make sure you adjust that for the following seasons. It really does make a huge difference. Okay, outside of that, let's get into this. Let's talk about matchups at the quarterback position, the more advantageous ones. Of course, the Atlanta Falcons giving up the most points to opposing quarterbacks. Tom Brady's very familiar with that, as 2 weeks back, he had himself a very good performance against them. Of course, Tom Brady's coming off of a heater against the Detroit Lions, only in the first half, of course, but he should be putting up a big number against Atlanta. Speaking of the Detroit Lions, they are giving up the second most points to opposing quarterbacks. That is great for Kirk Cousins. He's one of the higher ranked quarterbacks this upcoming week. Again, Kirk Cousins has been fantastic. I talked about it in conjunction with Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen in yesterday's video, and earlier today with Irv Smith at the tight end position. This team, without Dalvin Cook, are going to be throwing the ball a lot. They're going to find a lot of success against the Detroit Lions. Jacksonville, of course, have given up a lot of points, have given up at least a minimum of a singular touchdown to every single quarterback they've played this year, and that began with Phillip Rivers in week 1. So I think Phillip Rivers is going to get back on his little bit of a trend of throwing 2+ touchdowns every single week, and definitely do it against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. We have the Tennessee Titans, of course, giving up a lot of points. That bodes well, or very well, for Deshaun Watson, the thumbnail in today's video. We have the New York Jets playing against Cam Newton. Not really interested in that. Cam Newton could barely throw the ball anymore. His shoulder looks completely toast. We have the Seattle Seahawks playing against the LA Rams, but the Rams, definitely not a team that I want to invest in with Jared Goff out this week. Even with Jared Goff in, no thank you. Regardless, we move on to Cleveland Browns. I don't really think Mason Rudolph will be putting up any numbers against them. I think he'll be getting run down by Myles Garrett for sure, to say the very least. The Los Angeles Chargers giving up a lot of points, but again, Patrick Mahomes is out this week. The Vegas Raiders giving up points. Drew Lock may be able to put up a good performance. We'll just have to wait and see. And then we have Houston, of course, giving up a bunch of points. That's great for Tannehill. Last season, Tannehill made a career pretty much and got a $100 million contract because of some of those performances against Houston last year. Really put up incredible numbers. But now that we've covered that, we can move on and talk about some of the tougher matchups at the quarterback position. Beginning with the LA Rams, of course, against Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray's been banged up. The Rams, they will be missing a couple players, specifically offensively. They're going to be missing Cooper Kupp, Jared Goff, and then they're also going to be missing defenders like Michael Brockers, a good defensive tackle. Again, this team is falling apart. Can Kyler Murray, at least rally the troops and get themselves into the playoffs? I think it's a very possible task. You'll see by the ranking on today's video. The Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, giving up very few points to quarterbacks. I think Baker Mayfield will be able to do damage to that defense, mainly because, again, the Pittsburgh Steelers offense with Mason Rudolph won't be able to move the ball. That is going to give good field positioning to the Browns. and will lead to their success. Of course, we have the Washington football team not giving up a lot of points. That doesn't really bode well for Jalen Hurts, but I think he's a little bit of a different quarterback. Being able to get upwards of 80 rushing yards per game gives you so much innate value and sets a floor of production that a lot of other quarterbacks cannot, at least catch up to or surpass in the current fantasy, landscape. We also move on to the Green Bay Packers not giving up a lot of points. That's great, but Mitch Trubisky finds himself value, has been a significantly better quarterback in the back half of this season than I've potentially ever seen him. So this offense has been churning. They've been putting up a lot of points, and hopefully, whether it's garbage time or regular time, he's going to be putting up a good performance. Okay, either way, now that we've covered that, we can go ahead and move on to our top 16 rankings at the quarterback position for Week 17 of the 2020 fantasy football season. This will be the last video in 2020. So again, thank you everybody for watching. Leave the like button down below. I really do appreciate it. Happy New Year. All right, let's get into these, shall we? We're starting off with Aaron Rodgers. We're starting our studs, of course, and this should be a little bit of a shorter video in comparison because again, these quarterbacks are guys that regardless are always going to start. There are very few guys that are going to take these spots. Aaron Rodgers is certainly number one. He is going for the record. He is potentially going to surpass his record for the most passing touchdowns in his career, potentially going to have his third MVP in the National Football League. And on top of it, the last time he played against the Chicago Bears, what did he do? He dominated against that defense. He dominated so badly that his offensive line didn't even give up a single sack. He was never touched. He was never pressured. Nothing. None of it. It did not exist. And I think something similar of the sense will happen again this upcoming week. Aaron Rodgers has been playing out of his mind this season. 100% my number one quarterback on the week this week. We have Tom Brady as our number two. Now, again, like I mentioned it earlier in the week when we talked about the wide receivers of this offense. With Ronald Jones back, it definitely gives them a little bit extra value at the running game. But when we're talking about throwing the ball against Atlanta, that's where you make your bread and butter. And that's where you get majority of your value from your quarterback. Tom Brady's coming off of a week in which he had 350 plus passing yards and 4 passing touchdowns in the first half against the Detroit Lions. Didn't even play in the second half. In the last 4 quarters that Tom Brady's played, the second half against Atlanta and the first half against Detroit, he has thrown for 650 plus passing yards. I mean, that in itself should tell you something. So again, he's airing it out. He's going to potentially lock in exactly where they were in the second half. That second half adjustment they made against Atlanta is where they found majority of their success. I think they'll go back to that and they'll start off with that. Beginning off with that kind of success will lead to a potential blowout in this game. I think Tom Brady's a fantastic play. We move on to Josh Allen. Again, Josh Allen's been absolutely unbelievable this year. The amount of improvement that we've seen, not only from his passing completion percentage, but his yardage, his lack of turnovers, his touchdowns. It's unbelievable what we've seen in this offense. And it just speaks volumes to the amount of preparation that this offense and he has done this offseason to get himself to where he is. Definitely made strides of greatness this year and potentially could have been in this, MVP conversation if Aaron Rodgers wasn't so good. But regardless, he takes on the Miami Dolphins earlier this season against the Miami Dolphins. What did Josh Allen do? He dominated against them. 4 passing touchdowns, 400 yards. I mean, he put up the numbers and it's not really going to stop him. I don't think anybody can at this point. I mean, he's played against some tough defenses. Pittsburgh, the 49ers. It's just, can anybody stop him at this point? I don't think that's the case. Even against the New England Patriots secondary with J.C. Jackson out back there. I mean, they couldn't really stop him. I know they got holdouts. I know they got players out with injury, but goodness, Josh Allen's just been electric as of late. That is why he's my number 3. We move on to our number 4, Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is on the thumbnail for a reason. Playing against the Tennessee Titans may be the easiest task that any quarterback can do in the National Football League as it currently stands. That defense is awful. They cannot stop anybody. Their pass rush is non-existent. And when you talk about that in relation with Deshaun Watson, the way he's able to move in the pocket, extend plays, find his receivers, and is getting more comfort even without having Will Fuller in the lineup with these other receivers, it's continuing to build momentum. And to be honest, when they're scoring 30 plus points against Tennessee earlier this season and coming off of a big, offensive week against Cincinnati this last week, I think they'll continue that momentum into this contest. It should be a higher scoring matchup and certainly in the favor of Deshaun Watson fantasy owners. Moving on to our number 5, we have Lamar Jackson. So here's the thing about Lamar Jackson. He's an absolutely fantastic player. He's been out of his mind as of late. 3+ touchdown in 4 out of the last 5 games. I mean, he has just been unstoppable. But as of right now, playing against Cincinnati Bengals, one of the easiest matchups at the quarterback position. The only thing that I see slowing down Lamar Jackson is the potential that they might blow out this team a little too early. I mean, the Cincinnati Bengals defense and offense will not be able to stand, the course of time with this, this Baltimore Ravens offense and defense. They're just going to get beat up. And the fact of the matter is, if Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens come out and they take an early lead, he throws touchdown, scores a lot of points, it might not be enough to, constitute a reason to keep him in the fourth quarter. They might just be running the ball the entire second half for, for all honesty. So that is why Lamar Jackson's a number 5 in comparison to being a number 1, 2, 3. I think he's got a lot of upside. But again, this offense, this defense, they might be getting after Cincinnati a little too hard this week as they try to make the playoffs. We have Tannehill as our number 6. So Ryan Tannehill, again, like I mentioned when we talked about matchups, has made a career after playing against the Houston Texans. I mean, just go look at his numbers last year against Houston. He put up insane numbers. And again, that was while Derrick Henry was just dominating on a weekly basis. So again, Ryan Tannehill, one of the most consistent quarterbacks in the National Football League. Of course, didn't have the greatest performance this last week against the Green Bay Packers. Did have himself a 40-yard run for a touchdown, which at least saved his week with a 10-point fantasy influx. But to be honest, I think Houston's defense has definitely shown over the last couple weeks, specifically when you're giving up 37 points to the Cincinnati Bengals and Brandon Allen, that Ryan Tannehill should at least find a minimum success of being a top 6 quarterback. Could even be better, to be honest. Could finish as the number 1. We'll just have to wait and see. We have Kirk Cousins as our number 7. We talked about it yesterday. Kirk Cousins has been unbelievable this year with 32 passing touchdowns. This week will not have Dalvin Cook in the lineup, but what he will have is an offensive line that will be protecting against a pass rush that is non-existent, against the defense that can't cover, with Justin Jefferson, Irv Smith, and Adam Thielen in the lineup. I think Kirk Cousins is going to dominate. I think 3 touchdowns is probably the base minimum of this week, along with a pretty good yardage count. I think at this point, 20 plus points in a fantasy 4-point per passing touchdown format is the base minimum here, and that is why Kirk Cousins is going to be fired up as our number 7 in a very advantageous matchup. I think they're just going to be putting up too many points for anybody to stop them. We have Justin Herbert as our number 8. Again, Herbert has been consistent all season long. Again, it's a matter of what he's going to face this week. If he's playing against the Kansas City defense that is not going to have majority of their starters, if they're missing Tyrann Mathieu, if they don't have Chris Jones as a defensive end or a defensive interior defensive lineman, what are they going to face? They're going to play against a second-string defense, a couple starters here and there, but it's not going to be the defending champions defense. That's not what they're going to be facing. And I think Justin Herbert could very easily, even without Keenan Allen this week, put up a good number of points against this defense, as he's proven all season long that he has found consistency, can easily throw upwards of 300 yards with 2 touchdowns plus, and also get himself some work on the ground for a handful of touchdowns. So again, he's found his consistency there. Hopefully this offense completely doesn't fall apart. I think they'll be fine. I mean, just going back to the last time he played against the Kansas City Chiefs, he came into that game expecting to sit on the bench. Tyrod Taylor, punctured lung, boom, and he's automatically starting. Imagine, and then he comes in and he competes against Patrick Mahomes. So again, I think the world's, his oyster at this point this week. As long as Kansas City's not putting up their best defense, and even then, he's played against their best defense and had himself a day before. Moving on to our number 9, we have Russell Wilson. So again, even though Russell Wilson, in terms of his upside, isn't close to what he was earlier this season, throwing 4+ touchdowns every single game, as of late, he's just been consistent, and that's fine. He's getting himself rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, and being able to throw the ball and find himself, a couple touchdowns per game. I think this week against the 49ers defense that honestly is falling apart, isn't really competing for much. And I know Kyle Shanahan really gets his team going, even in these games that don't matter. But I think Russell Wilson is very comfortable with that defense and should be putting up a lot of points. DK Metcalf is the main reason why I put Russell Wilson here. DK had an incredible contest against them last time. I think he could very easily do that once again this week. I think Russell Wilson as our number 9, not a bad option. We have Jalen Hurts as our number 10 against the Washington football team. It's tough, guys. I mean, it really is. That defense has been playing well all season long. That has been their mainstay. I mean, that is the reason why the Washington football team are where they're at in playoff potential. Now, with that being said, the Philadelphia Eagles took on the Washington football team in week 1. In that game, the Philadelphia Eagles gave up 8 sacks? 8 sacks. I mean, they just could not stop the pass rush of the Washington football team. And that pass rush has definitely improved over time. So the question is, can Jalen Hurts stay in the pocket, sit comfortably, and or if he has to, extend plays with his legs and get yardage? I think the answer is yes. I think the ability to have Jalen Hurts back in the pocket in comparison to a Carson Wentz is significantly better for them at this current moment in time, specifically in this matchup. So Jalen Hurts, as long as he's able to throw the ball, as long as he has options available to him. I know Dallas Goedert dealing with an injury, but Miles Sanders can get himself work in the passing game along with the slew of receivers that they have. I know none of them are really stepping up as the number 1 guy, but over time they will. Maybe we'll see another, presence of Deshaun Jackson coming out and scoring an 81-yard touchdown. We'll just have to wait and see. All right, we move on to our number 11. We have Phillip Rivers. So again, Phillip Rivers sitting as a number 11 quarterback didn't really. I honestly didn't go into this week thinking that was going to be the case, but I looked at it and I thought to myself, well, You're playing against Jacksonville. How easy is that? It is the easiest matchup that you could possibly ask for, specifically at the quarterback position. I mean, I know Atlanta and Detroit, they're pretty juicy, but Jacksonville's giving up just as many points. It's just a fraction of a point of difference. So, to be honest, I think this is a game in which, of course, the Indianapolis Colts must win in order to potentially make the playoffs. They're going to be putting up a fat number on them, and I think Phillip Rivers will certainly be able to do so, as he's one of the better quarterbacks in the league right now, being able to sling the ball. All right, we move on to our number 12. We have Kyler Murray. Now, even though Kyler Murray scares me because of the terrible performance he put up against the 49ers, the fact that he's injured and that he's been injured for majority of the second half of the season with a shoulder injury and now this leg injury, the question is, can Kyler Murray put up a good enough performance to save our fantasy week? I leave him at 12 because though I trust him, I don't trust him as much as these other quarterbacks because, again, the Ram defense and secondary, they're fully healthy. They're going to have a presence there. And with DeAndre Hopkins dealing with a little bit of an injury this week, it makes it a little bit trickier for this offense to find an automatic success. Kyler Murray's less likely to run the ball. He's been a little bit reluctant to run. I know this last week he showed a couple bursts here and there, but in comparison to earlier in the season, he's been a shell of himself. But either way, I see him as a top 12 quarterback this week. We move on to Matt Ryan. I think Matt Ryan has one of two potential outcomes this week. Either he shows up in the matchup against Tampa Bay and tortures them like he did the week prior against them 2 weeks back. Or he shows up and looks like Matt Ryan in the second half of that contest. Matt Ryan in the second half of that contest got sacked, turned over the ball, and did not look like the Matt Ryan that we normally know as a guy that is going to sling the ball. So it's one of two ways. And that kind of volatility does scare me, specifically in the championship contest. Therefore, I have Matt Ryan as my number 13. We have Mitch Trubisky here. Again, like I mentioned, it's a matter of whether or not he's going to be able to produce and keep up with the Green Bay Packers, or if it's going to be a garbage time measure. Because again, if it's garbage time and David Montgomery starts stealing touchdowns on the ground and we start seeing something of that extent kind of show up, then Trubisky's going to eventually fall out of this form. But if it's just Green Bay scoring and we got to keep up with our arm, then maybe that's the case. Maybe we get Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney more involved. Jimmy Graham scored 2 touchdowns this past week. Maybe he can do it against his former team. We'll just have to wait and see. But I think Mitchell Trubisky is certainly playing a lot better than he did perhaps in his entire career, and is at least earning himself a job next year for whatever team he ends up playing for. We have Derek Carr as our number 15 quarterback for this week. Derek Carr has looked way better in the last, 5-6 weeks. And to be honest, in comparison to years prior, this is probably the best Derek Carr we've seen. And he's only getting a better and better team surrounding him. Again, the Raiders are still building a potential offense. I mean, having Nelson Aguilar as your number 1 when you just spent a first-round pick on Henry Ruggs definitely does hurt to an extent, but potentially over time, we could see this offense, progress and see how this offensive receiving core kind of develops. But Darren Waller is their main guy. That's where this offense runs through, and you don't have to worry about it. As long as he's getting, the ball in his direction, he will potentially succeed. I think the Denver Broncos, though they are a better defense, doesn't really scare me to any extent. The last quarterback I wanted to mention is Baker Mayfield. I think in comparison to the other remaining quarterbacks, I don't like their matchups. I don't like the potential of them. Drew Brees may be a guy I wanted to throw up on here, but I think the fact that Mason Rudolph is legitimately the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers this weekend gives them such a disadvantage and gives a huge advantage in the direction of the Cleveland Browns, of course, a game that they should win against the backup quarterback, regardless of who else is starting on that defense or offense for Pittsburgh. I think Baker Mayfield has proven that he can find success. I know last week against the Jets, without wide receivers, it's going to make a big difference, but he's getting every single one of them back this week off of the COVID list. Should be success. All right, those are my Week 17 quarterback rankings for the 2020 fantasy football season. Again, Happy New Year to all of you. And until next time, which will be Sunday morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, kick off with Kirk. I'll see you guys. Peace.